Okay, so we're going to talk about the reasons why American Aborigines, aka American Negroes, aka American Indians, why they think that they're Moors. It's because of the deceptive practices of some of the Moors who are dirty, who are telling, Americans that they're Moors because, oh, look right here, the Lenapes, they refer to as Moors, and the Nanticokes. The reason why that is because the Europeans had lived and worked with and had children with the people that are called Moors, which is from North Africa, the Berbers. And it says Moor, noun, North African, Berber, one of the race dwelling in Barbary, late 14th century. So that tells you right there. People know where Africa is at. Africa is not on this side of the world. It's in the Eastern Hemisphere, of course, right? And then they said, in particular, Barbary, Northern Africa. Okay? So then I'm going to read you another definition that talks about Moor as well. This is from the website Merriam-Webster, and it says Moor, noun. Definition of Moor, one of the Arab or Berber conquerors of Spain. Then it also says second meaning Berber. Okay. Now it says Merriam-Webster. This is their definition of Berber. It says noun, a member of any of various peoples living in northern Africa, west of Tripoli. 2. A branch of the Afro-Asiatic language family, comprising languages spoken by various peoples of northern Africa and the Sahara, such as the Tuaregs and the Kabyles. Any one of the Berber languages. First known use of Berber, 1732, and the meaning defined. History and etymology of Berber, ultimately from Arabic barbar. Okay? Now I'm going to read you another definition of Berber. 13th century. Foreign lands, especially non-Christian lands, from Latin barbaria, foreign country, from barbarous, strange land, barbarian, meaning Saracen nations on coastal North Africa, is attested from 1590s via French, Old French Barbary, from Arabic barbar, Berber, ancient Arabic name for the inhabitants of North Africa beyond Egypt. Okay, American, noun. 1570s, originally one of the Aboriginal peoples discovered in the Western Hemisphere by Europeans. Modern Latin, Americanus, from America. Okay, so it's basically saying people that's been there from the beginning, they're Aboriginal. And it's said from the Western Hemisphere, and we know the Western Hemisphere is the Americas. So it doesn't say anything about Africa like it did, referring to the Moors for that reason. And it doesn't say anything about Barbary either. Okay, American, noun, a native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but not applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. Now, again, it's talking about the Americans as being native to the American continent, them being Aboriginals, and them being copper-colored as a descriptive. And they didn't associate them at all with the Barbary race from North Africa. So this is, again, another way how you know that the Moors and the American Indians, the Aborigines of the Americas, are not the same folks. Okay, now you look at this picture. It's George Washington. You see that Moor? Got on the turban. Okay, so it says here, this is from metmuseum.org, George Washington, 1780. And this portrait, George Washington's 1732 through 1799, is shown standing on a bluff above the Hudson River with his enslaved personal servant, Billy Lee, on horseback behind him. The view across the river encompasses West Point, New York, with a red and white banner possibly the Navy ensign adopted in 1775, flying atop the fortress. Trumbull had served on Washington's staff as an aide-de-camp early in the Revolutionary War. He painted this portrait from memory about 5 years later. It says when he was studying in London, it was the first authoritative representation of Washington available in Europe and was soon copied throughout the continent. And it says here, the date was 1780. Culture American, oil on canvas. The dimension of the painting, 36 by 28 inches. And classification, painting. It says credit line, bequest of Charles Allen Munn in 1924. Okay. So, as we see, that's a picture of the Moor. That's not an Indian. And this is probably the reason why a lot of people get confused, because people that's from the Moorish community, they always say that, oh, yes, the Moors and Indians are the same people. And it's probably because of this right here that they try to use that. How the Lenapes, how some of them might have mixed in with the Moors, and how the people refer to them as Moors, but the Moors obviously came over much later and had colonized the areas where the American Indians were. So let's look at it like this. Let's read this, okay? It says interrelated tribes. The Nanticoke and Lenape Confederation. There are 3 historically interrelated tribes of the Delaware Bay. The Nanticoke Lenni-Lenape tribal nation of New Jersey, the Lenape Indian tribe of Delaware, and the Nanticoke Indian tribe of Delaware. Each of these tribal nations are well documented in the historic record from before the establishment of the United States, so they're pre-colonial. Okay, so the tribal communities made up of the Nanticoke, originally called Nanticoke, and Lenape, also known as Delaware Indians, have intermarried for generations. The core historic tribal families have been specifically identified extending back to colonial times, and their unique continuing communities have been studied by and noted by researchers for over a century. While many Lenape and Nanticoke people migrated away from our ancient homeland, our families remain coalescing into 3 self-isolating tribal communities in southern New Jersey and Delaware. The Lenape Indian tribe of Delaware and the Nanticoke Lenni-Lenape tribal nation of New Jersey are also in an intertribal confederation, which mandates member tribes to require a documented blood descent standard for tribal enrollment in accordance with the tribal spiritual values, to maintain a tribal ban on pursuing the development of casino-style gaming. And it says here, John Norwood, since the mid-19th century, evidence has shown that the indigenous people of the eastern Chesapeake and Delaware Bay region did not all migrate out of the area. Tribal communities remained intact from the colonial period and continued as distinct, self-isolating, self-governing bands. Government records, news articles, anthropological inquiries, archaeological studies demonstrate that the 2 interrelated communities in Delaware and another in southern New Jersey maintain their own religious, social, and educational institutions, practice endogamy, and continue a tribal existence from before the founding of the United States. An 1855 court case in Delaware brings to light that the Nanticoke Indians remained in the area of a colonial American Indian community in what today is Millsboro, Sussex County. This is supported by court testimony, which specifically identifies several Nanticoke families and references them as part of a larger Nanticoke community. The claim is further supported by military records dating back a century earlier and an 1881 Delaware law that lists some of the members of the community as exempt from school tax due to the special racial designation. The community included descendants of at least 3 disbanded reservations from the colonial period. In the 1870s, a coalesced community of Indians also established their own school in the area of modern-day Cheswold in Kent County, which was called Moortown. This group, commonly referred to as Moors, is cited to have been in that area since at least 1710. It says this tribal community self-identifies both Lenape in Delaware and Nanticoke, according to 1892 news article and subsequent anthropological reports. So they're saying that, okay, these Indians, that they are Lenapes, and they lived in the area that was called Moortown. And then it says by the mid-19th century, the genealogy of the two interrelated Delaware communities is intermixed with other indigenous community in southern New Jersey, the area of Bridgeton and Cumberland counties. Some of the members of this community were related to residents of the state's Brotherton Reservation, which had been disbanded in the early 1800s. Most had been converted to Christianity and formed their own church by 1820. The common understanding was that they were the remnants of the Lenape Nanticoke communities called Indians of Cohansey Bridge. They came to be known variously as Gold Towners, Moors, Nanticokes up through the mid-20th century. As for at least the mid-1800s to the mid-1900s, the 3 communities known for their own members acknowledge each other as our people fellowship throughout the seasonal social events, relegate acceptable marriages as exclusive to members of 3 communities. In Delaware, the schools are legally identified as exclusively for the special racial grouping, variously called Nanticoke, Moor, or Indian designations, which are used interchangeably in public records of that period. Then it says 1903 Delaware law acknowledges those descended from the individuals listed in the 1881 special racial status exemption from school tax, Nanticoke Indians, and allows them to request documentation indicating the same of the purposes of migrating. By this time, the state legislature acknowledges the Nanticoke Moor Indian families are throughout the state. Subsequent investigations determined that. And skipping down, it says, during the time of the economic difficulty, many Nanticoke Moor families are leaving Delaware, moving to southern New Jersey and Philadelphia. Then skipping down furthermore, it said that the communities of the Nanticoke and Moor families migrated westward to Michigan and Ontario, maintaining a semblance of community in those locations where they are identified in public records as Indian. Now going down even further, and it says here, Indians who were baptized as Christian and adopted Western clothing and housing were no longer typically viewed as Indian in public documents, but were free people of color, colored, mulattoes, and were not racially identified at all. Okay, and it says white racial bias and stereotyping eventually view all mixed race Indians remaining in the eastern part of the country as mulatto or Negro, regardless of the individual genealogy or ethnic identity. Okay, so basically what they're saying here is, okay, it's been a long history that some of these Indians, basically the Nanticoke and the Lenapes in New Jersey and Delaware, that they had intermarried with each other. They kept their customs, but on the public record, they were known as being Indians. They wasn't on the public record as Moors, even though they might have mixed in with the Moors, I'm assuming, but that will be like an isolated case because not all the Indians had mixed in with Moors, so I think that's why there's a lot of confusion and why people think or believe that they are Moors and that Moors and Indians are one and the same when they are not. Now I'm going to read to you where the treaties are at, which specify the Barbaries, the Barbary people, the Barbary treaties. That's by Yale University. That's on their website. And then I'm going to go to another website, the archives, where they list the American Indian treaties. Now, this is from Yale University. As we know, it's an Ivy League school, and a lot of people look at their information as being legitimate. Okay, so that's why I'm using it as a reference. And it says Yale Law School, Lillian Goldman Law Library. Okay, and it says the Avalon Project, Documents in Law, History, Diplomacy. The Barbary Treaty, 1786-1816. Treaty with Morocco, June 28th and July 15th, 1786. And they have them up here by articles, from Article 1 all the way through Article 25. And it says here, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship. Now, this is, as we know, between the United States and America, which is not the land America, but United States of America, which we know is a corporation. And Morocco is also itself a corporation. And this treaty is a contract, and a contract is an agreement, okay, between two parties. Now, this was a business thing between these two, right? And this was, I believe, it was so that the United States people, the Europeans that wanted to call themselves Americans, so that they were able to come through the territory of the Moroccan Empire, which we know is North Africa, to go through those waters near North Africa without the Berbers basically messing them up, without the pirates, jumping on their ships and stealing their stuff, So anyways, it says, a treaty of peace and friendship with additional article, also ship signals agreement. The treaty was sealed at Morocco with the seal of the Emperor of Morocco, June 23rd, 1786. Delivered to Thomas Barclay, American agent. Original in Arabic. The additional article was signed and sealed. Original in English. Certified English translation of the treaty and of the additional article were incorporated in a document signed and sealed by the ministers plenipotentiary of the United States, Thomas Jefferson at Paris, January 1st, 1787, and John Adams at London, January 25th, 1787. The treaty and additional article ratified by the United States, July 18th, 1787. As the ratification, generally see the notes. Treaty and an additional article proclaimed, July 18th, 1787. Ship signals agreement. Okay, so then it says here, Congress, July 23rd, 1787, to be sent to the executives of the states, secret journals of Congress. Certified translation of the treaty. And then it says, to all persons to whom these presents shall come or be known, whereas the United States of America and Congress assembled by their commission bearing date and 12th day of May 1784 thought proper to constitute John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, their ministers, plenipotentiary, giving to them, or a majority of them, full powers to confer, treat, and negotiate with the ambassador, minister, or commissionary of His Majesty the Emperor of Morocco concerning the treaty of amity and commerce. So they're dealing with money, business, right? To make and receive propositions for such treaty and conclude to sign the same, transmitting it to the United States and Congress assembled for the final ratification. And then in here at some point, they're going to talk about how the Moors, how they are subject to the majesty and stuff like that. Okay, like right about here. They say, if we shall be at war with any Christian power, and any of our vessels sail from the ports of the United States, no vessel belonging to the enemy shall follow until 24 hours after departure of our vessels, and the same regulation shall be observed towards the American vessels sailing from our ports, be their enemies Moors or Christian. Okay, so then let's see here. Then it says here, it says, if any citizen of the United States shall kill or wound a Moor, or contrary, if a Moor shall kill or wound a citizen with a capital C of the United States, the law of the country shall take place and equal justice shall be rendered, the counsel assisting to the trial. And if any delinquent shall make his escape, the counsel shall not be answerable for him of any matter whatsoever. So basically, a Moor is a person that's underneath. They're subject to the Emperor of Morocco. That's what they're subject to. Okay, so they're under him. That's the whole thing, you know. And it says here, it says, if any Moor shall bring citizens of the United States and their effects to His Majesty, the citizens shall immediately be set at liberty, and the effects restored in like manner. If any Moor, not a subject of these dominions, shall make prize of any of the citizens of America or their effects, and bring them into any of the ports of His Majesty, they shall be immediately released, as they will then be considered as under His Majesty's protection. Okay, so it doesn't say anything here about Indians at all, just the Moors, and that they are underneath the dominion of the Emperor of Morocco. Okay, so this is a National Archives, and it says archives.gov, Native American Heritage, but we know that's a hijack because it's supposed to say American Indian. Okay, because anybody can be a Native American, meaning that they were born on American soil, but that doesn't make them an Aborigine, an Aboriginal copper-colored person. Okay, so anyways, American Indian treaties from 1774 until about 1832, treaties between individual sovereign American Indian nations and the U.S. were negotiated to establish borders and prescribe conditions of behavior between the parties. The form of these agreements was nearly identical to the Treaty of Paris, ending in the Revolutionary War between the U.S. and Great Britain. The negotiations ended in a mutual signed pact which had to be approved by the U.S. Congress. Non-tribal citizens were required to have a passport to cross sovereign Indian lands. From 1832 until 1871, American Indian nations were considered to be domestic, dependent tribes. So domestic meaning not, that they're here on this land, domestic, from here, but they consider them as dependent because the American Indians, the ones, I guess, who signed these treaties and became to be federally recognized underneath the BIA, they're considered as dependent because the federal government, the Congress, is holding their land in trust, and the Congress is the trustee over that said trust, which basically takes away the sovereignty of the federally recognized Indians, which basically makes them a U.S. citizen, okay, and makes them the beneficiary of that said trust. So anyways, it says negotiated treaties between tribes and the U.S. have been approved by the U.S. Congress. In 1871, the House of Representatives ceased recognition of individual tribes within the U.S. as independent nations with whom the United States could contract by treaty, ending the nearly 100-year-old practice of treaty making between the U.S. and American Indian tribes. Then they have here, for more information on American Indian treaties, it says publish government sources relating to Native Americans, providing information about treaties, policies, congressional hearings and debates, and the implementation of federal law. Then it says U.S. Senate records related to Indian treaties are described and guide to records of the United States Senate and the National Archives, 1789 to 1989, bicentennial edition. So that's 200 years worth of information that's archived there about the Indian treaties. And it says treaties negotiated between the American Indian tribes and the U.S. government required ratification by the Senate before taking effect. It says treaties that were not ratified by the Senate were not put into force, leaving unresolved issues. And it says the secret treaties with California's Indians by Larissa K. Miller, a prologue article, explores some of the consequences of unratified Indian treaties. So I think that'll be something that'll be really good to look at and to read. And then right here it says a map showing land ceded by the chief of the Cherokee Nation of Indians to the United States for the use of state of Georgia at the Treaty of the 8th of July, 1817. Okay, so, and as you notice, they said sovereign American Indian nations, and they give you the time period when these treaties were signed with the American Indians, and they didn't say anything about Moors here either. They didn't say anything about the Berbers or the Barbary powers or Muslims or anything like that. So that's how you know that if these two people, the Moors and the Indians, if they were the same people, then why don't you see those words used interchangeably in these treaties? It doesn't exist. So again, I made this as a part 2 because a lot of people have been trying to cuss me out in different Facebook groups and stuff like that. They've been trying to cuss me out, saying I'm a liar, coming underneath my video and all this and that. And I'm like, just telling me that I'm being decisive, telling me that I hate myself and all this crap. And it's like, no, I'm telling the truth. It's just that the dirty Moors or the confused Moors, they just don't know what they're talking about. And I just can't help that. So basically, at the end of the day, it is what it is. And hey, don't shoot the messenger. So the confusion comes in that is because they don't see people that look like them, that's of a chocolate complexion, of a reddish brown, copper colored complexion, looking like this. They don't see people that look like this. Instead, they see people that look like this. Instead, they see people that look like this, and they're like, oh, my people don't look like that. So they get confused and they start to assume that maybe it's true. Maybe the Moors are who are us and who we are as a people, because they see the paintings of the Moors being chocolate covered people, instead of the original images of the Indians. I think I made a slam dunk with this one. Please like, share, and subscribe. I already know they're going to be mad, but you know what? I just don't care.